Welcome to Lead with Kindness, your essential podcast for disrupting the workplace with kindness and wellbeing. I'm Helen Rimmer, and I'm armed with 20 years of leadership experience and a passion for positive psychology. I'm here to offer practical tips and share inspiring stories to revolutionise leadership. Ready to challenge the norm? Let's dive in and transform our workplaces together. It's time to make a difference. Let's get started. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Anna Reeve, a certified coach specialising in helping professionals find more compassionate working methods. Anna believes that integrating compassion into our work lives doesn't just enhance personal well-being, it also paves the way for success. Today, she's here to share her insights and strategies with us. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you so much for having me. It's amazing to be here.
Yeah, excellent. So, Anna, can you start by telling us what drew you to focus on compassion in the workplace and what personal experiences shaped this mission for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is kind of a very personal experience I had that's brought me into this world, because in my 20s and most of my 30s, I got totally stuck on the burnout roller coaster. And I had some pretty toxic work habits. I was constantly sort of striving harder and harder to prove myself, was constantly in search of perfection in my work, really sought like external validation for everything that I did, which meant I was really vulnerable to feedback as well. And in hindsight, I can see how much I connected my sort of value, my identity to my output and my
Yes.
productivity and ultimately my work. And really, I started getting interested in work well-being after I got signed off work.
Mm.
My burnout manifested as chronic migraine and chronic stress. And I kept taking time off work, and I was signed off work by the GP, and I started thinking, gosh, there just has to be a better way of living life.
Yeah.
And so initially I started my coaching qualification to kind of escape my kind of corporate world that I was in.
Yeah.
But it took me on a massive journey of self-discovery, as anybody who's done a coaching qualification
Yes.
will tell
Yeah.
you. You learn so much about yourself. And what I realized was that every time I changed my job, every time, or the times that I like shifted sectors or careers, was just bringing all the same stuff with me. And along the way, I kind of bumped into these ideas of compassion and being kinder to yourself, and others, and that just kind of resonated with my value system, I suppose. But it was actually when I'd finished my coaching qualification, and I was starting to set up my business while also going back to work after mat leave, because I have a part-time job that I do alongside my business.
Yeah.
And yeah, the stress of returning to work, building the business, and juggling new parenthood was a lot. And it was the perfect time to come across self-compassion.
Mm.
And I started listening to the audiobook of Kristen Neff's book on self-compassion.
Thought you were going to mention Kristin. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just like, where has this been all my life? So it really has been, learning about self-compassion and practicing self-compassion has been the thing that has helped me prevent burnout. Again, it's kept burnout at bay.
Yeah.
It's helped me with my productivity, my motivation, navigating stress, navigating kind of the emotional overwhelm that you get when you're kind of juggling a busy job and a busy life. And I can see it's really had an impact on like how my happiness levels and my relationships, because I'm a bit calmer, I'm a bit nicer to be around.
Yeah, definitely. I've loved, because I've known you since that sort of, you were going back to work type time, and yeah, I've seen your like narrative change, and it's been really interesting sort of to watch as an outsider. And as you've mentioned, the world of work needs more compassion.
Yeah.
how do you define compassionate work, and why is it vital in today's high pressure work environments?
Um, I mean, why does the world of work need a lot more
Yes.
compassion? Simply because the rate at which burnout is escalating is really alarming. And burnout tends to affect the people who are most dedicated to their jobs,
Yeah.
the people who are most conscientious in their jobs, the most passionate about their jobs, and those are the people who can do so much within their own careers, but also for the businesses that they work with. And it's so important to be looking after our employees' well-being so that they're not reaching that point of burnout. I think what's really important to recognize about burnout as well is that it's a slow erosion. It doesn't just kind of happen one day. And so when you're approaching it, it can be hard to recognize that in yourself. And that's why I think the compassionate leadership is so important, because leaders need to be able to identify when their teams are struggling and be able to put the support in place for them.
Yeah.
That is kind of providing different ways of working, providing different tools, so that the person is feeling that their skills and experience and their talents are being valued, but also in a way that is going to help them use them in the most manageable way. And I think a really important part of that is leaders role modeling it through their own
Yes.
self-compassion as well.
Yeah.
I think that's vital. I think if you're asking your team to do something, but you're not doing it yourself, you're actually sending a really powerful message that that you're not fully bought into it.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
you're talking the talk, but you're not walking the walk. I think it's really important, if you want to break cycles that lead to burnout, you need to be role modeling that as well. In much the same way as, we might be managing our own emotional regulation for our children, and we're having to kind of break cycles that we might have learned from parents or caregivers in our lives, and we're trying to role model a different way of managing emotions. We have to do that in the workplace as well.
Yeah.
And ultimately, there's so much research that shows that work well-being, employees who are happier, employees who are calmer, who are able to better manage their workloads, they're going to stay with you for longer.
Yeah.
They are going to get more done for you.
Yeah.
They're going to go the extra mile for you.
Yeah.
But also they are, importantly as well, like it's almost like this moral imperative to treat our people well, because they are people,
Yeah.
not just numbers.
And that's the key bit, I think. They're people and it's human centered. And I was thinking, as you were talking, both of us have been through our burnout journeys and we've learned a lot of skills along the way. It's a shame that we weren't given those skills to start with. We weren't in environments that enabled us and empowered us to see that behavior modeled elsewhere. And that's where that leader is compassionate really helps, doesn't it? As you say, if they're modeling that behavior, you're going to be confident to do it. I was lucky. My first job, I had a manager who was left at 2, so he modeled quite good boundaries of behavior. So I was lucky on that one. I did learn good stuff there, but other things I didn't, and
And I think for millennials, it goes like way kind of further back than that. I mean, we kind of grew up in a society that was telling us like you have to go to university.
Yes.
And I think you internalize an awful lot of stuff about work and the role of work in your life when you're sort of going through a school system that is just simply preparing you for work, preparing you to go to university to become a basically bit of human capital. And yeah, so it's about not having those role models, but actually also working in an environment that almost rewards burnout behavior. And I think that's a huge cultural shift that needs to happen, really, is recognizing as a business when you are potentially rewarding burnout behaviors, and learning different ways of managing your team.
And it goes back to school where attendance is so like it's a metric, but actually I mean, luckily, my son's school has been very understanding because he's had COVID, scarlet fever, and an operation this year. His attendance is quite low, but none of that he can avoid. And I've been really trying to help him understand that sometimes you have to listen to your body and not worry about how many days that is. But a lot of businesses model that same behavior and they're quantifying stuff, and it doesn't help people.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, even like statutory sick policy is actually
Yeah.
really ableist, because it's not, you know, that's the government setting a standard of it's okay to
Yeah.
not pay employees after so, or kind of
Yeah.
penalize them
Yeah.
when they are unwell. And that's a massive lack of trust there. And if you
Yes.
show your people that you don't trust them,
Yeah.
then you'll feel that in
Yeah.
their commitment
Yeah.
to you and in their performance.
Yes.
Um,
Totally.
yeah, so I think it's a multi-level
Yeah.
issue for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll get more compassion out there, and it will and kindness, and we will
Yeah.
change the world. Coming back to my questions, in your coaching, you emphasize creating compassionate work habits without compromising success.
Mm.
Could you share some practical examples of what these habits might look like?
So I think it's really, really personal
Yeah.
to each person. And so I think through coaching, it's very much that you help the person find their own way, right? So anything that I might say is, this is how you do it. Sometimes people come to coaching and they're like, just tell me the answers. um,
Yeah.
and yeah, there are some kind of tips and tricks that you can test out for yourself.
Mm.
I think the key thing is starting to unlearn this narrative that you cannot take a break without compromising your success, because
Yes.
it's such a false narrative that we have.
Mm.
And actually starting to understand how your body and your brain works, because ultimately we are not machines, we are humans, and humans
Yeah.
need rest and recharge in order for their brains to work at their optimum levels.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we don't learn. Like, I've only just been sort of learning this through my journey of learning about compassion and self-compassion in particular. And once I realized that, oh, I have a biological need, it's not just like, yeah, it's nice to have. It's like, oh no, my brain actually biologically needs for me to close down the stress cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so for me, I've started trying to do some exercise where before I used to tell myself, I don't have time. I go from work into my coaching business, and then picking up my child from nursery, and then I'm back into mum mode, and then it starts all again the next day. And but actually, when I started thinking about where are my priorities, and one of them, and what are my values, and one of them is my mental health, because once that foundation has gone, everything
Yeah.
else will crumble. And I thought, okay, well, we all know that exercise is really, really important.
Yes.
But I mean, it's been a good 2 years since more than 2 years since I did in any kind of
Yeah.
serious way. But so I've started doing couch to 5K,
Oh, lovely. Yeah.
which Anna in her 20s would have scoffed at that, because I was a bit of not a proper runner, but a bit of a runner. So I think my practical advice is to think about the small steps that you can
Yeah.
take, or one small step that
Yeah.
you can take to
Yeah.
look after your well-being, and to kind of put some boundary around
Yeah.
that. Because if you keep telling yourself you can't, then you never will. But if you start asking yourself, where can I do this? Where can I bring this in? Then you might actually start to see there are a few different opportunities in your day. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. It's the small stuff is the big stuff, isn't it? Finding that.
Yeah. I saw this thing once, and it's really stuck with me. It's like, when things are big, we go small, and then we go smaller, and then we get even smaller. And I think some people, especially when you are a bit of an overachiever,
Yeah. I feel like
it's
you know
really
you're talking to me.
but like,
Yes.
it takes one to know one. But when you're
Yeah.
kind of like, you've always pushed yourself hard,
Yeah.
to think of just doing something small, you're always like, oh, but then the next thing, but the next thing, your brain is like got this habit of thinking about the next step. And I try and encourage people like, no, we don't get there yet, because if you're trying to think of that bit, you're never going to take the first step. You need to take the first step before you take the second step that leads to the third step. So it's about building it up.
Oh,
Yeah.
I feel seen. Yeah. It's like, I love swimming, but I don't just do swimming. I decide that I'm going to try and swim the channel in a certain amount of time. It's that like
Yeah.
not a real swim the channel, but do that many lengths, or oh no, I can't just go for half an hour. I need to do a 5K swim in 2 hours. And it's that sort of, but you're right, I need to just go back to the pool and start there and do a length.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
know. I'm such a huge advocate for that, of like,
Yeah.
just so, for example, with the swimming, you might be thinking like, but I need to get the most out of it, I need to be going at least 3 times a week. And it's like, we'll just start with one.
Yeah.
Start with one 15-minute swim.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can build on that.
Yeah.
And you're more likely to stick with that.
Yes. Yeah, I'm going to go off and do that. No,
Okay.
that's free coaching. That was a very good demonstration of the so many professionals need help with the idea of turning off after work hours. What advice do you have for those finding it hard to disconnect and ensure they're not always on?
So I think another thing that's really useful is to think about like, why do I want to do this? What impact is it going to have? Because you need to be motivated to make any change. And so if it's kind of looking at, what is it that makes me want to switch off at the end of the day? And it might be, I want to be more present with my loved ones, or it might be, I want to reconnect to some hobbies that I've just really let go, or it might be, I'm just, my friendships aren't as strong as they were because I keep neglecting them, because I'm always kind of checking my emails or feeling like I can't finish on time and I'm cancelling plans. So it's about thinking, what is the core reason that makes you want to switch off? And that's your motivation. And how can you remember that in the moment? So it's one thing to be, listening to a podcast or in a coaching session, or thinking very theoretically about what you might want to do, but actually in the rush of your everyday life, you can dismiss it or you can forget it. And so I think it's really useful to have a visual reminder. That might be something that you have stuck up on your laptop screen, or it might be time in your diary that is a kind of like an Outlook reminder, a reminder of some sort that comes up, or it comes up on your phone if you don't want it in your work setup. So yeah, I think it's all about kind of tapping into what is going to motivate me to do this. How can I remind myself of that motivation in the moment? And trying to create something fun around it. So it might be that, it's about replacing, like, have you heard like you've got push off factors and pull factors, right? And so my push is my why, and my pull is, oh, well, there's this exciting thing that I get to do if I just log out at like 5:30. I think my other thing is going back to the small thing as well, is like, don't try and do it every single day. Don't be like, right, I'm fed up of not finishing on time. From Monday, I'm going to finish on time every day. Because it's just, you're going to find that a really big mountain to climb if you've always worked in a certain way that is not logging off on time. So I would say, maybe say, right, Wednesday is my day that I am definitely going to finish on time. I'm going to book in a really nice class that I'm excited to go to, whether that's like an art class or an exercise class, or I'm going to go and have some time in the garden. It's tapping into the things that really light you up, and saying like, that is the day that I'm going to do that for myself, and give yourself permission.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. It's that giving yourself permission comes up so often, doesn't it? It's
yeah. I think for a lot of people as well, it's the like, I just don't know where to start. So that's why I'm like, start with something that really like lights you up, and start with something that is going to connect in with your why you want to do it, and then replace the activity you're doing with something that is going to pull you into it.
Yeah.
Mm.
So your approach has been described as supportive yet challenging.
Mm-hmm.
How do you balance these two aspects in your coaching to help your clients achieve their goals?
So any good coach is
Yeah.
going to challenge you,
Yes.
and they're going to do it in a way that's on your terms as
Yeah.
well. So I think one of the ways that I establish that with my clients is to just check in about how I can challenge them, even like session by session, and be like, how's challenge feeling for you today?
Yeah.
Which sometimes you can even tell, you're like, oh, they've had a hard day, I got to go gentle.
Yeah.
So what does that look like then? So I think challenge, when I'm challenging a client, I might be really listening to what they are saying and even what they are not saying, and reflecting that back at them and asking them to consider it, really consider it. So they might say something and they're not even conscious that that's stuff that they've learned that may not be objectively true. But you know, it's all about doing it in that really compassionate way, in that way that is like I guess kind of nurturing, and replacing this harshness that they are probably using on themselves all the time, and replacing it with this like encouraging approach. So for example, I'm trying to think of an example. Sort of try not to use examples from my specific clients that I've been working with
Trying to
recently.
anonymize it and turn it into
Yes, I'm trying to draw one from my own life, really. But so for example, if I was talking to somebody who's coming on to do a podcast, and they were sort of telling themselves all the reasons why, and this was a new thing for them, and they were telling themselves all the reasons why they might mess it up, or they might not say the right thing, or they might not get messages right, and usually that kind of stuff is going to come out in the coaching session. They're going to be telling me all the reasons why they can't do it, all the reasons why they should never have agreed to it, all the reasons why maybe they should pull out, etc., etc. And so a challenging but supportive approach would be just reflecting back at them that they're saying this stuff. It might be saying, what would you say to a friend, or what would you be saying to your daughter about this? So I guess that's the challenge. It's kind of highlighting, these are the things that you're saying to yourself. What is the tone of voice you're using here? And reflecting back at them, that so they can see, yeah, I'm actually being really mean to myself here. And getting them to kind of look at the facts of the matter instead. So, okay, you're telling yourself that you don't have any of this experience. What experience do you have?
yes.
Right. And then as soon as they start listing it off, it's like, okay, so you're counterbalancing yourself. But I might even set people tasks as well, like to one of the things that I was taught a while back was two different options, where if somebody's full of self-doubt and self-criticism about something, to set them the task of either writing a letter to themselves,
Oh, I love
as
that.
if they were writing it to a friend who was going through this, or as if they were being their kindest version of themselves.
Yeah.
That suits one personality type, and the other personality type might be kind of write almost a legal argument for yourself. So this is a fact, right? This is the counterpoint to that fact. This is something I think is a fact, right? Well, how would I argue against that point? As it really depends on the personality of the client. But yeah, I like those little tactics.
I've never heard of the legal argument bit. I've done the letter stuff,
Yeah.
but the legal arguments are brilliant.
Well, I think like for some
personality.
Yeah, some people, they're kind of more drawn to that like spiritual side. Like, you know, if you're going to write a letter to the universe, what would that look like? Like, I know for me personally, I'd be like, I'm not writing a letter to the universe. That's just me. I like, no shade on anybody who does that. Like, you do what works for you, right? Whereas I can be like, I grew up in a household of three girls. We argue. So
do that.
yeah, sisters argued when you're younger. So for me, that letter was like a revelation. I was just like, oh, I can give myself a fact, and then I can say, no, but wait. So yeah.
Brilliant exercise for people to do. So you've spoken about the importance of not sacrificing our energy, time, relationships, fun for work. How do you help your clients redraw all these boundaries?
Yeah, I suppose it is understanding what is the narrative that you've built around work and helping them to uncover the direct impact that that is having on everything else. And then kind of delving into what are the values that you really have in your life within work and also beyond work, and how are you meeting those or not meeting those? Because when we are completely out of alignment with our values, like we feel it, like things feel crunchy, we feel unfulfilled, we feel like something's missing. We start kind of questioning, like, is this it? And we start building resentment. Potentially it leads to burnout. So yeah, I think that's kind of core, really, is doing an audit of where you're at. And this is what I do with my clients. We start with an audit of like, okay, what's going on? Where are things working, where are things not working? And then we will delve through some of that. And then later in my coaching program, we'll do a deep dive into the values. Because I think what's really, really important is knowing like why we're doing things so that we can catch ourselves when we're doing them. And being really kind of self-aware of what's going on in our body when things, so like having a very, very stressful moment, how is that physically manifesting for you? And by that I mean like kind of you can feel your heart rate going, or you can feel your shoulders getting really tense, or you can hear yourself getting snappy or kind of muttering under your breath. And like, what are these red flags? How do these red flags kind of show themselves to you? So once we know what's really important to us, when we know what our red flags are, we can start to be like, oh, I'm doing something that isn't allowing me to live my best life. It's preventing me, is getting in my way from living the life that I really do want to live. So I think those are kind of really, really key. And really, I think as well, the other thing, I've been listening to the Work Joy podcast, and there's one about play, and they talk about how important play is and how we often forget to play as adults. It's almost like, well, I'm a very serious and important person, and this is my job title, and this is what people with my job title do. So sometimes it's about going, who are you beyond that job title? What are the things that you loved doing as a kid? What really lit you up as a kid? What would you want to kind of rediscover from that? Or what are the new what are the new hobbies that are sort of you've been following on Instagram, but you've not been actually doing in your life? And how can you kind of access those things? But I worked with somebody who was talking about how important creativity was, but all the stuff that she was struggling with at work was then also stopping her from getting started with her creative life. And so we were kind of unpicking some of that, and by unpicking the work stuff, she suddenly like felt able to embrace her creativity again, sign up to things. And I think sometimes we don't realize how much our narratives around work are stopping us from doing all the other things that we love in life, how they're impacting on our relationships. Like if you finish work, you've had a bad day, you come home, you're snappy, you get into arguments with your partner, then that's going to impact on your relationships. You're not present with your kids because you're worrying about something at work. And when we uncover all of this, it becomes a big motivation for changing the things at work.
That layering, isn't it?
100%. That's a really good way of putting it. The layers.
So some of our listeners are probably ready for a change, but unsure where to start. What
Mm.
first steps would you recommend to fostering a more compassionate approach to their work and life?
I think that is the number one challenge. I think people are bombarded with like work. Like we all know we need to look after our well-being. We all know we need to look after our mental health. We all hear this stuff about like fill your cup first. But how? Where do I start? And especially when you're overwhelmed, it's really, really hard to not see it as another thing to put on your to-do list, and another thing to give yourself a hard time about.
Mm.
Like, oh, I'm not being nice enough to myself, and I'm going to give myself a hard time for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the irony is not lost. So the one thing that and this was my entry point to self-compassion, was learning about the self-compassion break.
Yeah.
And it's something so easy that you can do in any part of your day.
Mm.
And it's a habit that you have to kind of like develop, but ultimately it is really, really easy once you start. And again, you can like have something in your phone to remind you of like the 3 steps, but it's 3 basic steps. And this is directly from Kristen Neff, who is queen of
Oh yes,
self-compassion
Queen. Yeah.
research. And our first step
Yeah.
is we are recognizing what's going on and objectively that it is a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that might look like, say you decided that you were going to finish on time one day, and then you haven't finished on time, and then you're rushing to get home to do whatever you need to do at home, and you're feeling really panicked by it, and you're giving yourself a really hard time, like, I told myself that I would do this and I didn't do this, and when am I ever going to do this, and what's wrong with me? And so the first step is kind of going, I'm having a bit of a struggle here. This is something that I'm finding hard.
Yeah.
And then the next bit, second step, is to recognize that that is a perfectly human experience. So it's not me who's at fault for this. I'm not, and that's not to say like I have no responsibility, but that is to say like this is hard, and anybody would find it hard. This is objectively hard. And part of being human is sometimes hard things happening. And the point of the humanness is to recognize that you're not at fault, you're not kind of inherently flawed, I suppose, by struggling with something. So we recognize that we're the hardness of something. Secondly, we recognize that that's an inherently human thing to struggle. We're not inherently flawed with it. And then the third thing is that, and this is really important, is that we speak to ourselves in a really kind way.
Yeah.
And we offer ourselves the support that we would offer to somebody else.
Yes.
And so to go back to the example of not finishing work on time, being like, didn't do what I said that I was going to do. I'm frustrated, I'm disappointed, and I'm being really impatient with myself, and that's really hard. It's really hard to feel that way, but it's also quite a normal reaction because I didn't kind of follow through on something that's really important to me, and that's a human response. That's a totally human response to have when something hasn't gone to plan. But I'm going to give myself a break because I'm still learning. This is breaking habits of a lifetime, and that's no easy thing. And the most important thing is that I'm trying here, and I'm taking steps. And I'm going to choose to be really proud of myself for taking those steps. And I'm going to learn what stopped me from finishing on time today, and I'm going to apply that learning and do something different tomorrow or next week.
Lovely. Yeah, that is so good. And that brings us quite nicely to my final question, which is for anyone interested in your coaching, how can they best get in touch or learn more about your work?
So I am probably most likely to find me hanging out in LinkedIn these days. So you can find me there, Anna Reeve Coaching. The same thing for my website.
Yes.
And that's where you can book a chat with me. straight through my website if you are keen to understand a little bit more about how self-compassion can help you in your work happiness and your work productivity and your work motivation. I'm also just about to launch my brand new one-to-one coaching program, which I'm really excited about. It's a 4-month coaching program called Happier Work, Happier You.
Oh, lovely.
And I'm going to be opening the waiting list to that shortly. So you can jump on my mailing list.
Brilliant.
Which you can access through any of my website, my LinkedIn, my Instagram. And yeah, you could be first to find out about it.
Brilliant. I will obviously put all of this in the show notes and I'll also link to the Kristen Neff stuff as well, because I've got all that handy, so we can share that as well. So Anna, it's been wonderful having you share your insights today. Listeners, Anna Reeve is a fantastic resource if you're inspired to adopt a more compassionate and kinder work habits. Thank you for joining us. And thank you to all our listeners for tuning in. Remember, transforming your work environment starts with a single step towards compassion.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
That's all right. Thank you for joining us on Lead with Kindness. I hope today's episode has inspired you and equipped you with practical insights to bring more kindness and wellbeing into your leadership journey. Remember, the transformation towards a kinder workplace starts with us, and every small step counts. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share it with fellow leaders, and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us grow and reach more people committed to positive change. I'm Helen Rimmer, and it's been a pleasure to be part of your leadership journey today. Until next time, keep leading with kindness and fostering well-being in all that you do. Goodbye and take care.